And welcome back to these returning wonderful afternoon elder interviews. And welcome to those who are about to experience them for the first time. This is an offering from Creation Spirituality Communities, where we explore the lives and experiences of our Creation Spirituality elders, women and men whose spirits shine bright with the hard-won wisdom of age. My name is Penny Andrews, a 2001 UCS grad, and I'm delighted to introduce today's conversation with Bruce SIlverman. It is also my pleasure to introduce Gail Ransom, who will be our interviewer today. Reverend Gail Ransom, a DMin through Wisdom University, is a pastor, educator, visionary worship leader, and ordained Creation Spirituality minister. She recently retired as co-leader of a weekly Creation Spirituality-based worship jam and has organized 2 national gatherings at First United Methodist Church of Pittsburgh, from which she recently retired as education director. Gail is the recent past president of Creation Spirituality Communities. So with no more ado, here's Gail to introduce Bruce. Sorry.
All right. Well, Bruce SIlverman has been a leader in the Creation Spirituality movement since 1991, when he led drumming and sacred dream work at Holy Names University. He has led the opening ritual, artist meditation, and process groups at UCS, the University of Creation Spirituality, and has brought his irrepressible rhythms to the cosmic mass. Bruce is the founder and director of the Orpheus Healing Arts Institute in Berkeley, California, where he offers teaching and group work from a variety of cultural traditions. The Sons of Orpheus, a men's community since 1987, continues the oral tradition of sacred sound, drumming, chanting, poetry, and storytelling. His classes and workshops include Embodied Dreamwork, and music and recitations at numerous churches, temples, and spiritual communities throughout the San Francisco Bay Area, introduce people to the rhythm of their own lives and souls. His newly published book, So What Happened to God? Religion, Science, and Democracy, explores both seriously and playfully music, love, death, politics, the Hebrew Bible, and more. Bruce's book is filled with poetry, and he is going to share some with us. So Bruce, welcome. And I wonder if you would be willing to begin with reading us one of your poems.
Absolutely. There'll be more poetry than discursive chit-chat today, and I hope everybody will be just fine with that. The right brain has been doing an unhostile takeover of me for the last 5 years or so. So everybody just tune into this frame drum, playing this Middle Eastern rhythm. Speaking of the Middle East, we're going to go to the Middle East. Imagine yourself in your own version of the Garden of Eden for a moment. The name of this poem is Drummers. Unbeknownst to biblical scholars, behind the tree of life in the Garden of Eden stood drummers. Now bear with this outrageous claim for a moment and consider the notion that after Adam and Eve grappled with the apple of evil and good, it was drummers who chopped the sacred wood and hollowed out the first drum, thereby soothing that theological schism with a great logarithm that still accompanies the sun to rise and the late afternoon shadows drift towards evening's obsidian crypts. Yes, it was drummers who set the tempo for Joshua's trumpets with primordial djembes and congas as Jericho trembled and tumbled while angels mumbled such shock and dismay at this raucous display of rhythmic play. Yes, it is drummers, misconceived by critics with their fruitless analytics, who were better perceived by kids at play than those doughty violinists who just concluded their triumphant armadas of sonatas. Yes, drummers whose weathered hands dance their dream drumming riffs on wooden skin They're back in the temples, on altars for moments where spirits need raising and angels need praising, to answer the call to spark the moving and a grooving, the rockin' and a reelin', and the cosmic function at the junction, where we sanctify with holy wine and sacred bread the rumba, jazz, samba, and salsa, flamenco, fandango, and the sensuous tango, reminding us that we swing in a universe that pulses and palpitates the yearning heart with the one vibration, be it final ending or primal start. So you can see not to take this too seriously.
And yet the playfulness, it's richer than it would be if it was just serious.
Thank you for seeing that.
Yeah. So you say you've been taken over by your right brain over the last 5 years, and that, of course, as we age, we do switch which part of the brain that we approach life with. And so what are the nuggets of wisdom? Do you have any that you're going to kind of open to us today? Can you give us a few that you've embraced over the years?
The greatest one will be that I know that I don't know, and then I don't have to say anything else today. Isn't that correct? Yeah. Mm-hmm. But you all know what the big issues are that have been confused in our culture for the last few thousand years. It is all about music and vibration. And I think we separate that from our notions of God. This is in my chapter called Notions of God, but it's all over the book. It is all about vibration. It's not really about identity and personality, although we all have one, and we need one, and we need an egoic structure. But there are distinctions to be made around science and Bible and life and death and time and space. And especially this work of mine lately is about the cognitive and rational versus the poetic and musical. So it's that left brain, right brain dance that is so much the part of the work that I've really always done, but I'm articulating it a bit more with poetry now. So it seems like it's going to be a lecture, but it's not. There's enough playfulness. I trust and I hope that you'll stay tuned as we go here. Go ahead.
How did you discover the drum for yourself? How did that drum come into your hands?
Wow, here's a good question. I'm in 3rd grade. I've got my pencils. I'm sitting at my desk doing my homework, and I'm riffing like Buddy Rich. And my mother walks by as I'm doing my homework. And who would think a Jewish mother would encourage her son to play drums, right? That's just not done. She, you ought to play drums. She felt and saw the rhythm there. And when it was time to choose an instrument in elementary school in 5th grade, there I went, not realizing what I was doing. But there was even a force probably greater than my mother from who knows what past that was pushing me. In more than one reading, people have looked at me in Haiti and other places and said, oh yeah, you've done this before. So in East India to become a tabla player, and I've dabbled with it, but they say it takes 3 lifetimes to become a good tabla player. Mm-hmm. So this was just my first on tabla, I can tell you that. I'm going to read a poem about cosmos and that big picture that you asked me about a moment ago.
Yeah, okay, please.
It's called We Are Stars. Okay. It's so unfair that these folks have their microphones muted. I want them to be yelling and screaming, but are you guys all still there? Just nod your heads or something. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. They're holding up their screens.
Okay.
I'll give them to you.
You're not a tourist in this cosmos, so enough with the guidebook. You'll miss the point. You're a flurry of sparks of the Big Bang. You're a flaming ember of the 100 million year chrysalis fireball of creativity of the highest sort. You're a melody line in the universe, the one song that is singing itself, and we harmonize with it each moment that we laugh and cry, smile and ache, dance and drum, snap and clap, move and groove. And when we drop our masks and dare to chant and sing, then we get to strut our stuff with that sparkling cosmic bling. So go ignite the mystical spark that invites you to contemplate, meditate, penetrate, germinate, and procreate. Oh, my stars, what did I just say? As they used to say, huh? Get out there, shout Mazel Tov. Remember that it really means good planets. Mazel Tov means good planets. Realize that the Big Bang is still bursting, that our cosmos is ever expanding, and we are its wide-eyed, lusting partners, eager to join the spiral dance. So dust off that mandolin and soften your grumpy heart. Mel, buy a copy of Street Spirit and say hello to friends and lovers. Forgive your enemies and honor your precious teachers before you miss the point that you are the point. A shimmering, vibrating strand of light inside a universe that continues its mysterious hopscotch far beyond our antiquated notions of time.
Oh.
So we are stars.
Yeah, you just took all those little boundaries and burst one open after the other, kind of opening the box until by the end we're just like floating in time or out of time.
Yeah, yes. There's a little bit of beat poetry mixed in there. Today they probably call it a little hip hop or something like that. But I'm not afraid to use a little rhyme and alliteration. I think that those have been denigrated horribly and unfortunately, because life and speech and poetry is about music. And if you completely eliminate a Robert Frost A, B, C, B, D, E, F, A, B rhyme scheme, you're missing something. You know, there are geniuses who've done this for eons. And so some of my poetry will actually have what they call, oh, how droll, it rhymes. But stick with me on this, okay? Where are we, Gail? But by the way,
we're landing right on being a musician. And so somehow from the little boy playing on his drums and taking us to 4th and 5th grade, then went to music school, and at some point you were connected to the spirituality of it, and you started the Orpheus Healing Arts Institute.
Well, I did. There was a time when I was in a new age band that sang to the goddess, et cetera, but I can remember a gig in Santa Cruz where I'm packing up at 1:30, and it was mostly a big jam where everybody danced, and I felt really empty, realizing that my path was not to lean so much towards entertaining and making dance music for people, but that it was really about the integration of healing and music, and that my music needed to be in service of that. And riding on the wave of the men's movement with James Hillman and Robert Bly and storyteller Michael Mead and others, women too, who were supporting men in finding balance. In those days, I started the Sons of Orpheus healing group, which still met 32 years later last night.
Wow.
We were on retreat in Aptos over the weekend doing some very deep work. So that hasn't stopped for me. The men's work happens, and over the years, we've been with, as I say, Robert Bly and Caroline Casey and, Naropa University. We've worked, and I've had the chance to rub shoulders and teach with Gene Bolin and maybe the greatest of them all, Angeles Arian. I can't say enough about Angeles, who let me call her Angie.
Well,
and this guy named Matt Fox, who you may have heard of, and Stanislaus Grof and Raymond Moody. So I have been so blessed and so blessed to be able to be thrown in there as a ritualist, because yes, I wrote a book recently, but I'm 39 books behind Matt Fox here, if you know what I mean. So never where I'm going to cut my teeth on being a voluminous author. So I was able to come through the back door, the dark door, the well, the music, the grief. In fact, my class, Drum Time, Dream Time, Drama Time, was called at UCS, you might recall, Drum Time, Dream Time, Trauma Time, because people would go into the deep well, and that kind of healing would also happen. It wasn't all flight to the light. But let me do another poem or two about where music meets spirituality, where music emerges from that pain I was talking about that you may have witnessed in the sacred cave.
Oh, I experienced it. I experienced that healing my very self. Yeah.
Yes, you mentioned that to me the other day, but we'll go there next time. All right.
Okay.
We'll let each individual report what happened in the cave, and then I'll be barred from ever showing up there again. Okay. Up the Mississippi, this is called. It went up, starting in West Africa, the rhythm, carried by the tortured and dispossessed, still managing to possess the best despite whips and slave ships. They couldn't stop it. Up the river it sailed on backs that sweated and bled. From New Orleans, Memphis, and St. Louis, it spread and bred. Louis and Ella, Billy and Miles, Duke and Train, Charlie and James Brown, who's going to drive you insane. Tip your hats to the nameless who tugged us all up rhythm's river and made us reel and rock. 'Cause for heaven's sake, our stay on this earth includes a tick and a tock. Here's one more in the realm of music that I think really speaks to the relationship of music and religion. So many people would think, well, I go to church, I go to synagogue, I do this, and they have music there, or they do a song there, or let us do a song or two. But what people don't realize is that the music itself is at least as primary as religion, or what we call religion. So I play with that notion here, and rather than give you an expose on it, here's a little poem. The words were coined by my 3-year-old daughter when she was 3. It's called Shabbat Shalom Went Up the Hill. If those of you who don't know, Shabbat Shalom means good Sabbath in Hebrew. So she was walking around the house spouting, yes, the ditties that spoke to her rhythmically. So Shabbat Shalom went up the hill. Yes, years ago, our 3-year-old daughter merged those two worlds, oblivious of the inherent wisdom in this delicious rhythmic flow of her creation. Shabbat Shalom went up the hill, indeed. The Sabbath greeting of choice for Jews wedded to a nursery rhyme, suspended in stop time, like exultant tango partners. What they share is religion and music, and who leads and who follows is in question, kind of like Ginger Rogers mirroring every step of Fred Astaire. But as you know, she did so backwards and in high heels. Fred still got the top billing, as does Judaism, over the eyes-closed reverential chanting of the Shema. Catholicism over the imitative counterpoint of Ave Maria. And Buddhism over the rhythmic murmurations of the Lotus Sutra. Religion may have been birthed at Olduvai Gorge as a dispirited clan marveled at Lucy's bones 60,000 years before they found her. Or it may have been the first song whistling its rhapsodic joy and grief across that East African savanna. As for our lifetime, there was Coltrane, who entwined music and a nameless spirituality into a love supreme, perhaps the title of the next new religion.
Coltrane.
Coltrane.
So, as a Jew, as you studied, you got into the Kabbalah, or you still are into the Kabbalah.
Yes, yes.
And the meaning of, and well, you're talking about the English words, letters earlier, but, or the European words, letters, but how about the DRM Nexus? What about Dalet, Resh, and Mem? And all that comes out of that combination of the sound, the vibrations, and the...
Yes. We don't realize that the deeper teachings sometimes are hitting us every day right in the face as we read even a newspaper article, because a word like drum and dream and drama sort of beg the question of their etymology. You even look at the letter D and you can see a pushing out, a pushing through, a poking, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Hebrew still carries a hieroglyphic element. DRM is a nexus of letters that has a teaching of its own. There are several of these in my teaching today. D means drum, but it also comes from the word dalit that means doorway. So like Joseph Campbell's Hero's Journey, there's a journey that the drum and the dream and the drama all give us by breaking out of a doorway. The word resh is like the word rash. We encounter something. We rush, we rash. Things are rash. We bump into something. We have a great adventure. And then mem is the hieroglyph for water, which is the mother. So we return to the womb. We break out, we encounter, we go back to the womb. Neruda's poem, for instance, really tells us that the deep, deep water is where we end up. And that's a yoga we should be practicing, is going to the well. I hardly ever run a group where we don't at least imitate a well happening right in front of us here. Let me give you a short, playful poem called It's a No-Brainer. That kind of tells you, well, not about the well so much, but about the process of either thinking or going to that other realm, that other mythopoetic realm, we might call it. It's called It's a No-Brainer. Once upon a time, as in a dream, there were giant gilded birds that built their nests in the branches of cinnamon trees, and we humans rode on the back of those winged creatures, marveling at the verdant mountains below, breathing each precious moment in a boundless spirit world. Then over time, our brains grew. We were taught to know thyself, think and therefore to be, and that we are what we eat. Great thinkers now assure us that the winged creatures of yesteryear were but brain secretions. So the question arises by even greater thinkers, does all consciousness reside inside the scope of the human brain, or does it fly on the wings of birds? Indeed, does all consciousness reside inside the scope of the human brain, or does it fly on the wings of birds? To me, it's a no-brainer. This is where you're all supposed to laugh, just in case you didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, but you just can't hear us because we're.
So, I wonder if I want to do Zen lunatics. I found a phrase by Jack Kerouac, and I riffed on it and kind of went back to 1954. And this is really about, well, it's about creation spirituality communities. It's about finding a community that's in harmony with where you are on your psycho-spiritual journey. That's the way I would say it. So I'm going to read this poem. Unlike the last one, I don't have it quite memorized, but take yourself back to the 1950s for a moment. Can you hear that pretty well, Gail?
Yeah, I think so.
This is called Zen lunatics. Because, folks, I think you're all a bunch of Zen lunatics. What do you think of that? Yeah. And that's a high compliment. Even in 1954, Kerouac Jack knew that a spirited Zen pack would one day emerge and tear open that star-spangled puritanical gunny sack, strangling America's sleeping zodiac. It's clearly our calling through outrageous and vivacious acts to bring down those heat-seeking missile epistles that would deny any and all who display any figment of dark pigment, a face too tannish or an accent too Spanish. Yes, I've had the good fortune to hang with such a gang of jacks, of kings with spades and clubs that transform into talking sticks for Zen lunatics with bright diamond minds and open hearts that make an end run around the 10-ton anchor of our civil rancor and then fly into an end zone far beyond what's known or owned or cloned toward a different way, where there exists a glimmering gateway of genius and justice, adorned by crimson roses, a wide, welcoming gateway that never closes. Now, black cats tend to like this poem, is what I found.
Well, that's why she jumped up on my desk.
Yeah,
As she heard that poem, she said, "This one's for me."
that one's for you.
So all these poems are in your book, is that right?
They are in the book. Here, I'll pull out a copy of the book.
Yeah, let's look at it.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes, it's got a bizarre title. It's got an overwhelming title.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you read the title?
So, what happened to God? Religion, Science, and Democracy. No,
Yes.
Religion, Science, and Democracy.
Yes.
Poems and essays by Bruce Silverman.
So I try to run the gamut here of talking about theology, but see how it interfaces with politics, and a lot of it, well, a lot of the inspiration came from this, for just thinking about our notions of God and how they've changed over the years. So I'm going to read a poem called In the God Kitchen, where I'm taking on the task of just telling you the nature of Western theology for the last 10,000 years in 55 seconds. Does that sound like a fair deal?
Sure.
Okay. Okay.
Easy.
This is called In the God Kitchen.
Okay.
Out of the Arabian desert 4,000 years ago came an unknown, monolithic, jealous, and all-powerful male deity. We embraced him, grouchy moods and violent temper, for 30 centuries, till Joseph Campbell and Starhawk informed us that he had really been a she for the previous 6,000 years. Today's door-knocking evangelists, however, never got the message. They're still selling that Sistine patriarch with a theology as black and white as the suits they wear, but far more threadbare. More recently, some of us sought the gentler version of divinity. In Judaism, the Shekhinah. To temper his distemper, we tried varieties of the all-nurturing Earth Mother. Too, we tried her with soup ladle in hand until we read the fine print. Warning, this product contains no MSG, but it is made in kitchens by Kali and Pele with traces of fire, skulls, and dragons, and may cause severe spiritual dyspepsia. What we long to stuff into a grocery bag of religious certainty and monotheism has more recently spilled all over the God kitchen into finger-licking splats of neo-paganism, steadfast drips of kosher-style Buddhism, frozen chunks of scientific agnosticism, and other concoctions, both yummy and awful. But friends, there is no cookbook that captures the savory taste of the divine. Words make tired recipes, cannot describe this sumptuous feast, and may cause fermented, dangling participles. My advice is to abandon the crusty old word pantry. Head for the nearest desert wilderness where you will be seized by a presence that is eternally becoming. There you will encounter glorious displays of deep purple dreams and revelations. For as earth is now Gaia and sky is now cosmos, we cannot keep flexing those Bronze Age brain muscles by giving you-know-who a gender, a proper name, and a Facebook profile. It's time to drink the potion that will rid us of the notion of trying to define what sparks the fires of creation and the deep swells of the ocean. Well, that was probably more than a minute, but I think 10,000 years, well, I didn't really cover it, but there you got a taste.
Yeah, it makes me wonder about so much that we're involved with it, kind of the gender diversity and gender fluidity. Got to get around to God. We have to stop saying it's male or female. It's just kind of, fluid. It's a word that's people are using these days. So, I think you told us a little bit about the overarching themes of the book. Anything else you want to say about that?
Let's see, overarching
themes. Essences, sun and moon, and dark and light.
Yeah, I think we're all pretty aware that we live in two worlds, and we've all read and know the Rumi poem, people are going back and forth across the door sill with the two worlds touch. Unfortunately, most of the culture doesn't live in the two worlds. and need some teaching about that. And dang, we're in trouble because people are looking at a monolithic world, and you know what it's doing. I retranslated one of Rilke's sonnets to Orpheus.
Mm-hmm.
And the ones that I kept reading were sort of antiquated. You know, poetic language used to change every 100 or 200 years. Now it changes every 5 or 10 years. So let me put it this way. Sonnet to Orpheus, number 9. Here's about the two worlds. Only those who play the Orphic lyre in the world of the departed will fully know the rapture of blessing one's days. Only those who have eaten poppies with the dead will revel in sound, in touch, and gaze. Though the reflection in the pool dissolves before your eyes, the essence of things lives in places dark and nocturnal. So live life in both worlds, where voices are enchanting and the heart of music is eternal. Any of you, give me a nod here. You ever read the sonnets to Orpheus by Rilke? Is that familiar to anybody? Boy, just Google some of Rilke's poetry and your jaw will drop.
I know about the poppies and the dead, but what I want to hear now is how you walk back and forth between the two worlds. What is your gait? What is your practice? What do you do?
Well, I'm kind of split here. And here, I was showing Gail 2 of the necklaces I happen to be wearing today. One is the Orphic world, the pagan world, the world of various cultures that practice shamanism. And there's the harp of Orpheus. I don't know if you can see it. Mm-hmm. The other is the story of David, which is the tradition that I grew up in, Reform Judaism in St. Louis, which was liberal, which was accepting, which is ecumenical, but it didn't have the juice. It didn't have the spark. And many of us who grew up in that wing of Judaism, thank goodness it wasn't the rigidity of the ultra-Orthodox, found our way to a thing called Jewish renewal. And I don't even know how many people know that phrase, Jewish renewal, but some mystics, like one of whom was Zalman Schachter, started traveling around the United States and birthing Jewish renewal communities, of which I am still a part. And I bring my drums, mm-hmm. and I bring my poetry. I can remember being in a relationship heartbreak, and a friend brought me to a High Holy Day service in Berkeley, where as I walked in, people were putting on their Tai Chi shoes in order to do some of their sacred practice of body movement before the service and bringing their drums in. That was my conversion. I looked around and I thought, in my own tradition, people are getting it. People getting it, that the drum belongs in the synagogue, not just the organ, which was kind of ridiculous for a Jewish temple in St. Louis, and that people can move their bodies and people can chant and people can dance in the aisles. So that's what Jewish renewal is for me. And I'm a presenter in several different spiritual communities. One called Hokmat Halev, the wisdom of the heart. That's on Prince Street, Mel, in Berkeley. I'm going to drag you to one of our services soon, next week, in fact, on the 26th. And another one's called Torah of Awakening. But in line with the theme of this book, it's so much about the music. The music sometimes feels more primary than whatever the liturgy is or the teaching. And you know, that's the way I think most of us who are enlivened see the world right now, that it is music and vibration more than it is a passage from this testament or that testament or somebody else's sermon or lecture, which, as enlivening as it can be for a moment, what is it that you're going to be humming when you walk out the door, right? It's not going to be you or me or Matt or the greatest theologians in the world. It's going to be the music that's going to sink right into our bones. So that's one of the reasons that Jewish renewal, as they call it, speaks to me, because frankly, it's Kabbalah and mysticism. And that's what was missing from the Enlightenment era that eschewed all of that stuff and said, well, mysticism is weird and astrology is dangerous and we don't want to go there. And so this wonderful thing has happened in my Jewish tradition in the last 45 or 50 years by some very wise rebbes, we call them. That's the name for a rabbi who's more than a rabbi. He's so or she's so esteemed that we call them rebbes. He's a great teacher. So Matthew Fox is a rebbe. In fact, he and Zalman at the university used to have dialogues. Does anybody remember on the TV screen in the up there? Maybe not, huh?
You have to be at the right place at the right time. But
yeah,
but he Matthew was at his memorial.
Yes.
Zalman.
Yeah. And Reb Zalman was a musician. He wrote songs. He wrote wordless songs. He would be playing the guitar and playing a Jewish theme, and then he was tricky enough that all of a sudden the Hebrew song he was playing would turn into green sleeves, and before your eyes you'd go, wait a minute, how did that happen? So his teaching would be simply play guitar and sing and move from one tradition to another. And he was ordained as a Sufi master too. I don't know if you knew that. Yeah.
I knew that.
So people, not only do we have gender fluidity, Gail, what would you call what I was just talking about besides interfaith work? We need a more exciting.
Well, it could be spiritual fluidity, or it could be religious fluidity.
Yeah.
Mysticism is just what it is. I think that's it.
Mysticism kind of gets it, right?
It's kind of like the place where we all meet.
We all meet in mysticism.
And because that's trust of the unknown, and joy in the unknown, and loving the questions, and I think that's the meeting point.
I'd like to check in with the group now. I mean, I don't know how many poems we want to do here. I'm going to share one called by Hafez, since we're talking about mysticism and we're talking about Sufism. This is one that I always worried about because there was a 2 or 3 line Hafez poem that said, this is Hafez now, not me. He says, the great religions are the ships and poetry the lifeboats. Every sane man I've ever known has jumped overboard. So this sounds a lot like Eckhart, doesn't it? Leaving God to find God. Mm-hmm. That's what I did, leaving Temple Israel in St. Louis and finding mysticism out here on the West Coast. And this is what I think everybody has to do to some extent, is to shuck off the old clothing of the old tradition. But then I asked the question to myself and to my readers, well, but what then, Hafez? So the name of this poem is You've Jumped Ship. What then, Hafez? You may ask, what then, Hafez? But then we'll drift across uncharted seas in lifeboats without the antiquated provisions of clerics. We'll survive by drinking holy rainwater, catching luminescent spirit fish and making midnight prayers of the heart. Then after years or decades, we'll board another great ship that will lead us onward, but not back to the familiar ocean of certainty. We'll sit and we'll join hands with those huddled in the dark recesses of the ship's steerage, who have dared to leave home forever in search of unknown lands. So that's my take on Hafez. If any of you who know who Estelle Frankel is, my good friend who's leading the service that I'll be a part of, she wrote a book called The Wisdom of Not Knowing. And I know Matt Fox endorsed that book too. It's one of the wisest books I've read in the last 10 years. So if you're looking for a good book about the honesty of admitting that we don't really know and that this is all a great mystery, read The Wisdom of Not Knowing by Estelle Frankel. She's on the back of my book here, and Matt's on the front of my book. So they're friends too.
So if we wanted to get your book, how would we find it? You want to go back to some of these poems?
Yeah, if you want more. 72 poems and essays. And although I'm doing some of the discursive and some of the essay talk out loud here, if you look at just a random page, you'll see I have an essay on the left and a poem on the right.
Uh-huh.
You can get it by going to brucesilverman.org. It's on Amazon. So you can just go right to Amazon with the name of the title and the author. It's also on Barnes and Noble, but you can go to brucesilverman.org, or you can find somebody who's got my phone number and call me up and we can talk, because, hey, why the heck not? So where are we now?
I usually we take a little shift at some time, which seems to be the right time is now, and fields the questions and sends them to you, if that's all right with you.
Sure, and I may answer them just obviously spontaneously, but also they'll touch some poems. And my agenda here was to break you all in if you haven't had one of these sessions that are 2/3 poetry yet. Welcome.
This is very unique. We've had some experiential other artists who have.
Kaleo, I'm sure, must have done something.
Oh yeah, we did
phantasmagoric.
Yeah, we did movement with him. We all stood up in our
I see
cities and worked with him.
Yeah.
Okay. So Penny, what? Thank you, Bruce. Thank you so much. Thank you. How rich that was.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Very rich.
I'm honored to be here. And let me just say before we start that how grateful I am to you, Gail. I'm getting a sense of how hard you've worked these last 4 years and how hard you worked just setting the session up. We've logged hours here, not minutes, getting the technology right, getting the earbuds correct, shifting the drums. So great kudos to Gail. So who's first?
Well, I'm the segue person, and I'd like to just offer a reflection, Bruce, on my surprise. One of the most significant to me artist heads was Michael Ziegler's Jewish Rites of Passage.
Yes.
All renewal, and it triggered so much connection that I went digging for Jewish roots, and it wasn't too hard to find in my family tree.
Yeah.
But prior, I hadn't known it, but I felt that energy that you were talking about. And later on, was able to go to one of the Berkeley synagogues for service.
Do you remember which one?
It was a beautiful exterior, kind of round.
It was maybe they're having the service at St. John's Church on College Avenue, perhaps.
I don't think I could get that specific, but
okay.
But Reb Zalman was instrumental, and his work was critical to my project, final project. And I'm so delighted that you, as someone who came up in a faith and then returned to a faith, when all this interjected. Wow. Yeah. So thank you for the memory of all that and the wisdom of all that. This is the point where we all have an opportunity to share a comment or a question for Bruce, and I invite anyone.
Before we do, could I interrupt for a second? Can I interrupt?
Sure.
Just that a moment ago, you had such a look on your face. You had a look of real pathos, and it was as though some of the pain of the ancestors just for a moment just breezed right through your face. And I don't know if others could see it, but if we were in the cave right now, you would have the next 45 minutes to yourself. That's what
Thank you. I think.
Right. Yeah, we all have tribal and indigenous pieces of old traditions in us. And I guess 23 and Ancestry.com are slapping us in the face and saying, take a look around and see what's in our bones. That's the phrase I used over the weekend. We looked very deeply at what was in our bones. So go right ahead. Sorry for interrupting.
Well, and just I'll take part of my 45 minutes to say that what I learned, because I went over to what was Danzig, which is now Gdansk in Poland, was that my great-grandfather first was in the midst of a very comfortable and exciting place to live for Jews and Germans and and then with the flip that all changed and they were off into Russia and then ultimately to emigrate from Gdansk, so
Yes.
from Odessa. And what I also learned is I only have 70 Ashkenazi relatives, and that's because they're that generation and several of those generations
Yes.
weren't around. And so the pathos was exactly right.
Yeah.
So
I
other,
happen to have a poem that speaks to exactly what we're talking about, and I'm assuming others may have some curiosity because it is Passover tomorrow.
Oh.
I am muted by the hosts.
Oh, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. My
Okay.
finger twitched. I'm sorry.
In honor of what Penny was saying and showing, I'm going to read a poem about Passover and the Exodus, because the tragedy of the Jewish experience over the last 1,500 to 2,000 years is something that anyone who identifies with Judaism has some very strong feelings about. So this is called Exodus, the Never-Ending Story. And it's unfortunately, with the Mueller report today, all too omnipresent. Exodus from America is a phrase that one is beginning to hear more and more these days. That was Exodus from America, folks. The E word sits in our DNA. Yes, we'll celebrate the great escape from Egypt, but it's never what it seems in the next bunch of Mitzrayim. That's the Hebrew word for Egypt. Ancient Egypt. Canaan, Rome, and Spain were all tragic illusions and heartbreaking dreams, as was Russia and Dansk. Yes, we'll celebrate spring and renewal, but along the tracks of our pilgrimage, we have had our original tickets punched merely as travel visas, affirming the truth that all beings on this earth are undocumented immigrants, walking hand in hand through the Sinai sand, across the Edmund Pettus Bridge, and the parched desert darkness towards the Rio Grande. The hands that penned the Torah did not begin with the creation or the fall, but surely proclaimed the duty for us all to heed the next call when the next Pharaoh starts to build the next wall.
My
So here we are. It's all happening right around us. And it wouldn't surprise me if not just Jews, of course, but others seeing potential writing on the wall where what we didn't think could happen in all of these places like Spain and Russia and Germany can happen anywhere, and indeed are starting to happen anywhere. So there's a Passover poem, and now I'm open to questions or comments.
Mel, I'm going to unmute you again. Mel, you're muted there you go. Okay.
Well, that's because my dog is barking.
Oh, okay. Well, then thank you for that. Yes. Okay. We can. Did you have a question, Mel?
I'll ask a question.
Okay, Tom.
It's interesting you're going a different direction, and I just have to say, having been with you on so many occasions, I've always been impressed at how your drumming teaching was in resonance with Russell Paul's
Yes.
teachings. And to take us down a rabbit hole, I'm just wondering your comments regarding drumming and chanting, and you can throw in the music of poetry in relation to vibration,
Mm-hmm.
and the concept of physics that at our basis we are nothing but vibration, and
Right.
the chanting, the drumming, the singing brings our vibrational dissonance back into balance and healing.
Yes. Was there a question there?
Yeah, your opinion on it all.
Well, it's interesting because one could argue that it doesn't matter which tradition we use, and that's what I'm saying. And on one level, it's true. And along with that, I would say, as Joseph Campbell used to say, it doesn't matter which software you're pursuing, whether it's Catholic, Jewish, Buddhist, agnostic. But he was always encouraging people to go to the depths of the software that they were born with, that's, again, in their bones. So I have no trouble, and I was so honored to be on several of Russell Paul's albums and to work with him. And he was my roommate at the Omega Institute. We went up there, and so I love this man. And yet his tradition and mine are different. And so one of the overlays that we might consider is that your own tradition that's deep in your bones, it should at least be considered. And I take away the word should because we all know how terrible that word is. But let me just say that I found a lot of sustenance in returning to some of the familiar songs and prayers and finding new meaning in them, rather than switching sponsors, which is wonderful because half my friends are Buddhists and really have no reason to do anything Jewish, and that's fine, and that works for them. So I guess I'm following more into the suggestion of Joe Campbell to find out what's in my own tradition, as I talked about when I went to those services, the High Holy Day services 30 years ago, and bumped into things in my own tradition that were in all the mystical traditions from West Africa, from Cuba, from Brazil, from going to study some of the indigenous religions of Brazil. And it was the drum that took me into mysticism, and then it was probably the drum that brought me back into Judaism. But to tell you the truth, I don't really feel any different about my connections to those other traditions. To me, it's just being layered, and I'm glad I found my own tradition, and I will be at the Passover Seder drumming and chanting tomorrow. But I do a lot of work at Peace Lutheran Church and have for 20 years in interfaith work, and all of that will continue. So to me, there's kind of like a balance going on between world mysticism and one's own tradition. So think it over, everybody.
One more point in relation to everything you just said and your discussion with Gail about Rabbi Salman. What I hear in all of it is deep ecology.
That's there, but that's not what you meant.
Deep ecumenism.
Ecumenism,
right.
Thank you.
Deep ecumenism, absolutely.
Yeah.
Zalman would go from one song to another at the interfaith services that they have out at Peace Lutheran. I don't know, Mel, have you ever been to any of those out my way? Because I live in Contra Costa County, so a lot of people in Berkeley don't think there's life east of the tunnel of Berkeley, but there is, and there's a very thriving interfaith community in Contra Costa County, and I'm a part of that. And there's Sufis, and there's Jain people, and all kinds of different traditions. So maybe we'll give someone else a chance to ask a question or make a comment.
I have a question. I don't want to take it too much away from where we're going, but
no, that's fine. Whatever.
Well, I was wondering if you integrate this in your therapy practice.
One can't separate the stuff that's in one's from the kind of therapy that you do. I have a very broad spectrum of transpersonal therapy that I do with people. And some people focus on techniques that are very helpful for people who are suffering trauma, for instance, and have tapping and eye movement and other modalities like that. And I seem to specialize more in people moving through different stages of psycho-spiritual growth and having them recognize that, and even recognize that a friend or a partner might be in such a different place that the relationship no longer works. And it's really hard. And this we get into Ken Wilber, and we get into Stages of Faith by James Fowler. James Fowler. And so, yeah, Scott Peck really vamped on that too in his stages of psychospiritual development. So one has to know where one is in that, on that grand circle of Ken Wilber's. And if someone's deeply ensconced, as one of my clients is, in becoming a mystic, it's actually apparently very rare that man could find someone mystically inclined enough to really hold him. And so that's more my specialty rather than the physical techniques of tapping and other things like that. So yes, this worldview and this theology is very much a part of my counseling work.
I wondered, in all your men's work,
Yeah.
at this point, what do you see as, we're in such a different time and place even
Yes.
than when UCS was happening.
Yes.
Where is what men need now as you see it?
I would say there was a big collision that happened with the fantastic, work that women were doing in the early 70s, and men were taken aback by it. And most of the men that I knew, maybe not men all over the Midwest and other places, and I shouldn't judge, but it seemed like men were taken aback and became what Robert Bly called soft men, lost some of their vitality and their uncertainty about how to still express themselves with dance and vitality, and know how to even have a peaceful disagreement with a woman friend or a partner. And that thing went back and forth. And I don't think we're in that time anymore, as you rightfully say. I think that each gender has a tradition that's probably 20,000 years old of men being with men and doing the healing men need to do, and women being in separate quarters or in a yurt doing the things that they need to do. So in a way, we've gone back to and forward from that confusion that happened in the 70s when so many different ways of being collided. And so I don't feel that any of that enmity that seemed to be there and that the media made fun of, and et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know if that begins to answer your question or
not. I thought I'd interject this quote that came by from Albert Einstein, and it seems
yes.
correct.
Okay.
It echoes one of your poems, at least, if not all of them. We are slowed down sound and light waves, a walking bundle of frequencies tuned into the cosmos. We are souls dressed up in sacred biochemical garments, and our bodies are the instruments through which our souls play their music.
Boy.
Wow. I've never heard that. Wow.
Albert, you're invited to our next retreat in Aptos.
Yeah.
That's all I can say. That's what we did. Music and enlivening, and one big puppy pile on Saturday night where we laid all over each other. There's a little nugget from. So thank you for that. Would you read that again? That was powerful enough that I'd like to hear that again. And maybe we all will.
We are slowed down sound and light waves,
a
walking bundle of frequencies tuned into the cosmos. We are souls dressed up in sacred biochemical garments, and our bodies are the instruments through which our souls play their music.
Yep.
Can you post that, Tony?
Sorry?
Can you post that?
Yes.
Maybe. Let's see. Gail, is there a way to receive this?
We can put it on the chat here, or else we can send it to everybody afterwards, because I have your email addresses. That's kind of what I have.
All right. I'll put it on the side.
Okay.
in a second.
Let me recite a poem, if I might, here as a response to to the time we live in and some of the other great minds of Einstein's time up to the present. I have a little playful poem here called At the Flea Market, so bear with me for a moment. Last week at the flea market, I spied Mahatma Gandhi, Rabbi Abraham Heschel, and the Reverend Martin Luther King perusing a small 2-pan measuring scale. One pan was marked good, the other pan evil. A discussion then ensued. Said Heschel, "This scale is flawed. The opposite of good is not evil, it's indifference." There's a nice quote for you, by the way. Gandhi replied, "Yes, I agree, for good and evil are often found together." Then Dr. King spoke and said, "I find this scale to be befuddling because, quote, there's some good in the worst of us and some evil in the best of us." With that, the three of them simply walked off. I timidly stepped forward and bought the scale. I took it home and measured the weight sitting in the 2 pans marked good and evil. And here's what I found. When compared, good and evil seem to be about equal in measure. But clearly, at times like this, it's necessary to put a finger on the scale.
Very nice.
Today especially, okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not let them get away with just, well, whatever. Okay.
Truly. Are there people online that were in the cave with Bruce that have a memory that they might bring forward?
Remember that you're many of you have muted yourself again, but that doesn't have to remain true. You can speak.
I didn't have
Well, I wasn't in the cave with Bruce. I was in some classrooms with him up at Holy Names.
Yeah.
Yes, and one of the things that I appreciated about it is I think that you bring it's like you are vibrating. Your energy permeates the experience for people. And I think one of the things that it does is it opened doors for people, for permission for people to be and explore whatever spirit's drawing forth in them, and to do it in a way that's healthy and respectful and revealing and surprising often. So I really appreciated that.
Thank you, Mel. You're an elder for sure. Thank you for your calm-centered wisdom. It's been there for a long time. Mel, you've been an elder for a long time. Even as a middle-aged man, you were an elder.
Bruce, you told me that you were willing to talk about aging and death. Your thoughts about that. Would you? I'm going to feel incomplete if I don't hear
aging and death. Well, how many of you know who Caroline Casey is? Anybody know Caroline Casey? Astrologer on the East Coast. She has a show, Pacifica Radio.
Coyote.
Yeah, she's a coyote, that's for sure. Thank you. I worked with her a lot when she came out to the West Coast, and my drumming community would accompany her. She said, "Bruce, I want to give you an astrological reading." And one of the main points she said was, as she looked at my birth chart, was, "You're someone who loves to explore death. You're someone who's unafraid of death and will approach it with curiosity." And she was exactly right. I've been thinking about death since a young man when I started to do, what was it that I read? Well, first of all, I'm a Scorpio with a Jupiter in Sagittarius, for those of you who have any idea what that's about. But I can remember reading Seth Speaks, and all of my work in the last 30 years seems to be infused with shamanic explorations. I went along, Raymond Moody and I taught at the Death Oracles of Greece in 2011. So it seems as though I've brushed shoulders with the teachings and the perspectives on death much more than the average person. So that's one of the things in my bones. And I don't know if there's any other questions or things to even say about that. Just that, how would the poet say it? Here's a Tagore poem that I can recall. Tagore says, "When death comes and whispers to me, thy days are ended, let me tell him that I have lived in love and not in mere time." And he will say, "Will thy songs endure?" And I shall say, "I know not, but this I know, that often when I sang and drummed, I found my eternity." So there's music and death as partners.
I've been there.
Yes. You've been there recently too, haven't you?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm so sorry. You lost somebody very precious. Yeah. Where are we in terms of time now? Is it time to sew things up with a poem or two, or a question, or Gail, you make the call.
Other comments? I think, Bruce, when you came out of school with knowledge about music, I'm guessing.
I never went to music school now. I just did different workshops and teachings. My master's was in counseling psychology.
Okay. So music always was a spiritual
yes
direction.
Mm-hmm. It was my avocation for a number of decades, and now it's entwined with my vocation and my life path.
So it was part of your evolution.
Yes.
But
I knew I was a drummer, as I say, in third grade.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so who are your favorite drummers?
The ones who are the most profound healers, who I can't name. The nameless people who are facilitating different communities throughout the world where the drum and where drum and spirit come together. That's what I would say my favorite drummers are. Not Gene Krupa and Buddy Rich. How about that?
How about Mickey Hart, though?
Mickey Hart comes closer, but even Mickey is more of a collector of different traditions rather than using the drum, as I understand it, to facilitate the deep healing within a community. And I don't know enough about it, but I knew when I was out here in 1974 studying with Zakir Hussain at the Ali Akbar College of Music, in the room was Mickey Hart studying tabla, and he was just one of the guys. But we'd all kind of go like this, like, there's Mickey Hart over there. You know, we were all Grateful Dead fans then, right?
So I wonder if, Penny, if people would just say a phrase or something particular from what Bruce has given us that spoke to them, so he could get some feedback from the rest of us who may not have a question, but just something they want to say thank you for. I'm going to unmute.
Well, I say thank you for all the poetry. It's wonderful.
You're welcome, Mel. You're welcome. That's the language I speak more now than the cognitive, it seems like.
For me, it was renewal, the remembering renewal, and having it still be so alive and present through your lens today.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that.
So I'm Anita, and I don't have a picture, but I hope I have a voice.
We hear you.
Great. So I just want to say I feel very refreshed, and I actually feel loved by what you've been doing.
Oh.
Thank you, Anita. I wish I could see your picture. How many folks are out there? Is it just? It's not just the 6 or 7 of you there. We have
Hundreds. No, this is the group that showed up today. I think.
I see. This is the peanut gallery then.
This is the peanut gallery. There's always more that sign up than show up. So these are those who actually got. I had a friend who was going to show up and she didn't. I don't know what happened.
I appreciate everything that's been said, and most of all, just a sense in my heart of my people. And just memories of UCS, and enrolling in that school was it 2003. My parents had died and I lost my job all the same year. So I said, you know, I'm free, rather look for another job. I think I'll go follow Matthew Fox. And
good for you.
I didn't want to move, and here was a graduate program that I could do. My first one was Kali and the Black Madonna, and I was a goddess scholar. And Jennifer Barazon was doing music with spiritual practice.
Yes.
Oh.
That was my intro. I signed up immediately.
So you got.
And it's probably the best decision I ever made.
Yeah.
So just seeing your faces and this conversation just thrills my soul.
Good for you. So you were in the Bay Area then? You were living in the Bay Area?
No, I live in Delaware now. It was at intensives. I came out for 1 and 2 weeks.
After the intensives. I see. Okay. But you got Jennifer's music, and you got right.
It's pretty
and
strong.
And a view at the church.
Yeah, the dark
Methodist
goddess.
Church.
Oh, you're at the Methodist church then. I see. Okay.
So yeah, I took some notes, and I'm looking forward to going back. It's appreciated this time together very much.
Mm-hmm.
So you can revisit this. Penny has put up on the chat. You just find chat down there. If you take your cursor down to the bottom and suddenly a little tray, listen to me with all this good language, will show up and you press chat. You can find out what she wrote there. And you can watch this interview again to get it again and see what you missed. Here are the poems again by going to the Creation Spirituality Community's website, which is creationspirituality.info. And or you can buy the book from Bruce, SIlverman.org.
Yeah, and that'll get you to Amazon.
And Amazon, you can go
right to Amazon, or you can do it through my website.
Jeff Bezos, the wealthiest person in the world now, and we can put some money in his pockets too.
Yeah, make sure he's taken care of, right?
and so you can always invite you to join Creation Spirituality Communities as a board of 9 people who put events like this together. Mel is on the board with me now. Tom was on the board and was a former president of the
I know.
So we appreciate having members. It keeps us going. It gives us the support. We also take donations. So you can just kind of go to the website and click donations and offer us something. That'd be much appreciated.
May I close with a poem? Would that be all right?
Yes.
It is slightly in honor of Passover. It's the crossing over the water, which is, of course, archetypal through the waters. And I'll just leave it at that. This was the first poem I wrote, particularly for the community, the Jewish community I was talking about, where a poem was needed to try to create some rain. This was in 2000. This was 5.5 years ago when we were in a drought. And this is called A Prayer for Rain. Some time ago, it became fashionable to assume that heaven was in the sky. But what if we concluded that it was really more nearby? What if heaven were beneath our feet, where we walk along troubled streets filled with sidewalk signs exposing desperate people in desperate times? What if heaven resides in our eyes, where tears arise, and we see the blank despair of those who seek their God-given share of this earthly prize? What if heaven's rains will only come cascading down when our hearts do truly yearn for what is under that crackling canopy of thunder? Perhaps it's breaking hearts that spawn the rain. and touch the hand of the one who opens reed seas, parts the watery depths, and with joyous torrents of medicine rain, invites all who dwell upon this earth to cross the pregnant, swelling Jordan River. Not just one nation, but all who are welcomed into the vast embrace of her creation.
Beautiful. That's beautiful.
Thank you all. It's an honor. It's an honor
Thank
being
you,
here.
Bruce.
Amen.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful.
Thanks, everybody.
Yes.
Thanks. Bye. Mel,
Bye.
I hope to see you on Telegraph Avenue, Mel.
Oh, okay.